They took my daughter, my little girl handcuffed on the front lawn, sobbing uncontrollably while 3 uniformed officers stood over her like she was a criminal. She was 12 years old, barefoot, wearing her pink pajama pants and a t-shirt that read, "Be kind." And all she did was exist. All she did was live her life, laugh too loudly, sing off-key to her favorite Taylor Swift song, and try to feel normal in a world that already made everything harder for her. But that morning, the world turned on her. That morning, it wasn't just hard, it was brutal. I remember screaming so loud my throat cracked as I ran down the sidewalk, watching one officer shove my daughter into the back of a police car. She kept looking back at me through the window, her little hands cuffed in front of her, tears streaking down her face, her lips trembling as she tried to breathe through the panic. "Mommy," she cried, "please don't let them take me." I wish I could say this was a mistake, a miscommunication, something that could be cleared up with a few phone calls. But it wasn't. It was deliberate. It was malicious. And it started with one woman, Karen. Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, watched the entire scene unfold from her porch, arms crossed, face smug, expression void of empathy. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She sipped her coffee like it was just another Tuesday. Like destroying a little girl's spirit was her morning routine. She had orchestrated the entire thing, every lie, every complaint, every whisper into the ears of those who had the power to ruin us. And it worked. Her fabricated noise complaint turned into a false accusation. Her personal vendetta became official action. And my daughter, my innocent disabled daughter, became the target of a nightmare that never should have happened. You may be wondering, how could this happen? How could a child, one with a diagnosed disability, end up treated like a threat by adults by the system meant to protect her? How could the word of one bitter, manipulative woman be enough to override logic, compassion, and basic humanity? I asked myself those same questions as I watched the taillights of that squad car disappear down our quiet suburban street. This isn't just about a noise complaint. It's not even just about Karen. This is about a system that listens to the loudest voice, not the most truthful one. A neighborhood that closes its blinds when injustice arrives at the doorstep next to theirs. An HOA board that enables cruelty under the guise of rules and community standards. And a mother who would rather burn the entire damn place to the ground than let them get away with what they did to her daughter. What happened next will leave you speechless. Because this story, it gets darker, colder, more unbelievable. But you need to hear it. You need to know what Karen did after the arrest. You need to know how deep her obsession ran and how far the HOA was willing to go to protect her. And most importantly, you need to know what we did about it. Because this story doesn't end with a little girl in a jail cell. It begins there. My name is Alyssa Carter, and for most of my adult life, I lived with a quiet hope to raise my daughter in peace. Not luxury, not perfection, just peace. My daughter's name is Lila. She's 12 years old now, and every breath she takes is a miracle. She was born 3 months premature, fighting for her life in the NICU before she even opened her eyes to the world. By the time she turned 2, doctors diagnosed her with moderate autism and a sensory processing disorder that made everyday noises feel like explosions in her little brain. Loud footsteps, a dog barking, even the microwave beeping could send her into panic. But Lila, my brave little hummingbird, grew stronger with every challenge. She doesn't speak much, but when she does, her words are careful, deliberate, and beautiful. She loves music, especially classical piano, and she's obsessed with outer space. She can tell you every moon of Jupiter and hum Beethoven's Fifth with perfect pitch. Lila has a smile that could melt steel, and when she laughs, really laughs, it's like sunshine being poured into a cold room. She is joy incarnate, and I built my life around protecting that joy. 2 years ago, after saving for nearly a decade, I bought our first home. A modest 3-bedroom in a tidy suburban neighborhood called Windmere Oaks. It wasn't fancy, but it had a fenced-in backyard for Lila to run in, a quiet cul-de-sac with barely any traffic, and a reputation for safety. That's what sold me, safety. We had lived in cramped apartments before, where neighbors slammed doors and shouted through the walls. The noise was unbearable for Lila. But here I thought she could finally feel calm. We planted flowers together in the garden, built a little birdhouse out back, and every evening we'd sit on the porch swing and watch the sun dip behind the trees while Lila counted the stars. For a while, it felt like we had found a slice of heaven, a little sanctuary in a chaotic world. I worked remotely as a data analyst, juggling Zoom calls and deadlines while keeping Lila's routine stable and gentle. I homeschooled her part-time, coordinated her therapies, and made sure every inch of our house was designed around her comfort. Lavender curtains in her room to block harsh light, noise-canceling panels in the hallway, visual schedules laminated and color-coded. Every choice I made was for her well-being. We weren't loud. We didn't throw parties. We didn't make trouble. We were the kind of neighbors who baked cookies for the holidays and waved at strangers from the driveway. I thought that was enough. I thought being kind, quiet, and respectful would make us safe here. But I was wrong, because there are people in this world who don't need a reason to hate. People who look at difference and see danger. Who see a child like Lila rocking gently in place on the porch, humming to herself. And instead of seeing beauty, they see a nuisance. And one of those people lived across the street. Her name was Karen. And from the moment she laid eyes on us, I felt it, that cold, evaluating glare, like she was measuring us against some invisible rulebook and finding us lacking. I brushed it off at first, told myself I was imagining things. But deep down, a mother always knows when her child is in danger. I just never imagined the danger would come wrapped in polite smiles, HOA regulations, and laminated violation slips. We weren't perfect, but we were peaceful, loving, quiet, and we never saw the storm coming. Karen Whitmore lived directly across the street from us, in a two-story beige colonial with symmetrical rose bushes and a flag that read "God bless this home," fluttering beside her porch swing. From the outside, she looked like any other suburban retiree. Perfectly pressed khakis, garden gloves on Saturday mornings, a short silver bob that never seemed out of place. But it didn't take long before I realized that Karen's smile stopped at her lips. Her eyes were cold, calculating. You know, the kind of neighbor who waves with one hand while dialing the HOA with the other. Karen didn't just live in Windmere Oaks. She ruled it. She was the president of the Homeowners Association, a title she wore like a crown. Every month, she chaired the HOA meetings in the community center like she was presiding over a royal court, her clipboard always in hand, her voice syrupy sweet, but heavy with judgment. She knew every line of the HOA bylaws like scripture. She quoted them like gospel. Grass too high? You'd get a notice. Holiday decorations up a day late? She'd post a picture in the neighborhood Facebook group with a passive-aggressive caption, "Let's keep our community looking its best." Her power didn't come from kindness or respect. It came from intimidation. And people let her have it, mostly because they were afraid of being on her radar. We were on her radar from day one. I still remember the first time we met. Lila and I were sitting on our porch eating popsicles after planting marigolds in the front bed. Karen walked by slowly, eyeing our yard like a surveyor with a hidden clipboard. She stopped at the edge of the lawn, smiled that tight-lipped smile, and said, "New here?" I stood, brushing dirt from my knees, and extended a friendly hand. She didn't shake it, just looked past me, toward Lila, who was humming softly and flapping her hands the way she does when she's excited. "Everything okay with her?" Karen asked, voice flat. My heart sank. I forced a smile and replied, "She's just happy." That's her way of showing it. Karen nodded, but it wasn't the kind of nod that said she understood. It was the kind that said she was filing something away for later. After that, the tension simmered just beneath the surface. Karen's glares became routine. Every time Lila giggled too loudly, Karen's curtains twitched. If a toy was left on the lawn, I'd find a note taped to our door. "Please maintain curb appeal for the community's benefit." Once, When Lila was dancing barefoot on the grass to a song only she could hear, Karen walked over and muttered, "It's a shame some people don't teach their kids boundaries." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I bit my tongue. I told myself she was just old-fashioned, that maybe she didn't understand. I tried to extend grace where I should have drawn a line, and then came the reminders. HOA notices citing vague infractions, excessive noise, failure to maintain outdoor order, unregistered child activity. Yes, that's exactly what the form said. It sounded ridiculous, but behind those words was a threat: conform or pay the price. I knew then that Karen wasn't just unfriendly, she was dangerous. This wasn't about flowers or fences. It was about control. She saw something in us, maybe our difference, maybe our joy, that she couldn't stand, and she was about to wage war. What I didn't know yet was how far she would go. That this wasn't just neighborhood drama. It was the beginning of a campaign, an obsession that would spiral into cruelty beyond anything I imagined. Karen didn't want us to leave. She wanted us destroyed. And her plan was already in motion. It started with a letter, a plain white envelope, no return address, tucked neatly into our mailbox like a threat in disguise. I opened it while sipping my morning coffee, Lila sitting cross-legged beside me on the floor, humming softly while she colored in a picture of Saturn. The letter was typed, cold, formal, and dripping with manufactured politeness. This is an official warning from the Windmere Oaks Homeowners Association. We have received a complaint regarding excessive and disruptive noise emanating from your property during daytime hours. Please take steps to ensure a quieter environment in accordance with HOA Regulation 4B19. Excessive and disruptive noise? I blinked at the paper, confused. We didn't host parties. We didn't blast music. The loudest sound in our home was Lila's gentle humming or the occasional episode of her favorite educational show on low volume. She didn't even like loud things. Her entire sensory profile made noise painful for her. So how could anyone accuse us of being too loud? Then I saw the second page, a printout of HOA Regulation 4B19. It stated that any prolonged sound activity, including musical instruments, electronics, or vocalization that exceeds 60 decibels measured at the property line, may constitute a disturbance if it impedes neighboring residents' enjoyment of their home. It was vague, overreaching, designed to be twisted and used like a blade. I knew exactly who filed it. Karen. There was no other possibility. No one else had a problem. Our immediate neighbors on both sides had always been kind. One even baked cookies for Lila when she found out about her disability. But Karen had been watching us, measuring us, looking for the first chance to strike. And now, she'd found her weapon. The accusation wasn't just absurd, it was personal. That very week, Lila had been going through a new therapy routine involving music prompts. Her occupational therapist had introduced a calming exercise. Lila would wear her headphones, listen to gentle piano music, and sing along softly. Her voice, light and breathy, barely rose above a whisper. I would sit across from her, tapping my fingers in rhythm to give her a sensory anchor. It was a beautiful, peaceful thing. And yet somehow, to Karen, it was a problem. To her, it was noise. When I asked the HOA for proof, any recordings, timestamps, decibel readings, they had nothing, just the complaint. They told me they had to take every resident's concern seriously. I asked if they were aware that Lila had a documented disability, that she was engaging in therapeutic activity, not throwing a rave. The response I got was a dismissive shrug and an offer to work it out neighbor to neighbor. Neighbor to neighbor? With Karen? I tried. I walked across the street one afternoon, Lila clutching my hand, nervous but brave. We rang her doorbell. She opened the door halfway. Like we were solicitors, I just wanted to talk about the complaint. I began. I think there's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, she cut in sharply. Your daughter screams all day long. It's disruptive. I can hear it when I'm gardening. I stared at her. She doesn't scream. She sings, softly, and always with headphones. Karen folded her arms. I don't care what she's doing. It's too loud. Some of us have standards. That word, standards, felt like a slap. She didn't see Lila as a child. She saw her as an inconvenience, something broken, something out of place in her perfectly curated world. And she was going to use every rule in the book to erase us. Over the next week, more letters followed, each more severe. Second warning, pending fine, non-compliance. I appealed. I begged. I explained again and again that we were doing nothing wrong, that no one else complained, that Lila was being targeted unfairly. But it didn't matter. Karen had filed the report, and now the HOA was backing her like it was gospel. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. It was about power. Karen didn't want quiet. She wanted submission. And when she saw that I wouldn't bow to her, she set her sights on someone more vulnerable. She started watching Lila more closely, recording her on her phone, writing down what time she went outside, how long she played, what sound she made. It was sickening. And the worst part? No one stopped her. The fake noise complaint was just the beginning. A seed of cruelty planted in a garden of rules. And the roots were spreading. The real storm was still ahead. At first, I thought the noise complaint was a twisted misunderstanding, a cruel overstep by a woman with too much time and too little empathy. But I was wrong. It wasn't a one-time offense. It was the first move in a calculated campaign to make our lives unbearable. A campaign with one clear target, my daughter. Within days of the second HOA warning, I noticed Karen standing across the street more often, arms crossed over her chest, her phone raised like a weapon. She'd stand there during Lila's therapy exercises, when she was out in the yard chasing bubbles or lying on a blanket looking at the clouds, recording every movement with a cold, steady stare. It wasn't casual either. She wanted us to see her. She wanted Lila to know she was being watched. Lila, bless her heart, tried to ignore it at first, but she noticed. She's not oblivious, no matter what people assume about kids on the spectrum. She started asking me in her soft, slow way, "Why is the lady staring at me?" And then one afternoon, when Karen raised her phone and pointed it directly at Lila while she was dancing in the grass, Lila froze. Her body stiffened. Her eyes welled up. She ran inside and locked herself in her bedroom, curling into the corner and rocking back and forth until she fell asleep from exhaustion. That night was the first time she cried in her sleep. I reported it to the HOA, of course. I wrote a detailed letter. I called. I explained that my daughter was being harassed and filmed without consent, that it was affecting her emotionally, mentally, even physically. Their response? A polite but useless email. We encourage neighbors to resolve differences amicably. Windmere Oaks HOA does not mediate personal disputes unless property damage or criminal activity is involved. Karen's campaign escalated. She began submitting written logs to the HOA board. I got a copy from a sympathetic neighbor who once served as secretary. It read like a surveillance report. March 17th for 15 p.m., minor outside making loud vocalizations. For 32 p.m., minor engaging in erratic movements near mailbox. 4:46 p.m., loud humming audible from sidewalk. She submitted photos. She even claimed Lila was a threat to neighborhood tranquility. That's the word she used, threat. And the HOA listened. The fines started showing up next. $50 here, $100 there. Failure to abate noise disturbance. Violation of community quiet hours. Non-compliant behavior from minor resident. I appealed every single one. I wrote letters, presented documentation from Lila's therapist, even offered to meet with the board personally to explain our situation. But it didn't matter. They had bought into Karen's fiction. Her polished, suburban venom worked better than my truth. Lila began retreating from the world she'd only just started opening up to. She stopped wanting to go outside. She started lining up her toy planets on the windowsill again, regression I hadn't seen since she was 6. She refused to wear her headphones anymore. She started whispering everything, even to me, and at night, she'd wake up shaking, begging me to make the staring stop. No child should say that. No child should feel hunted in her own front yard. I tried everything. I filed a police report about the filming, but was told that as long as it's from her property and in public view, it's not illegal. I contacted a local autism advocacy group, and while they offered resources, there was nothing they could do to stop an HOA from enforcing its bylaws, no matter how twisted the interpretation. I even recorded Karen recording us, sent the videos to the HOA. They responded with another fine for having an unapproved camera facing public spaces. That was the moment I realized they weren't neutral. They weren't just ignoring me, they were enabling her. The more Karen got away with, the bolder she became. She left anonymous flyers in our mailbox about neighborhood peace. She called animal control when Lila squealed excitedly at a squirrel. She even complained that Lila's sidewalk chalk drawings were graffiti and distasteful imagery. They were stars, smiley faces, a planet with rings and the word happy. Somehow, Karen managed to turn that into a crime. I was unraveling. Between work, appeals, therapy sessions, and trying to hold my daughter together, I barely slept. Every moment outside felt like we were walking on glass. The home I had worked so hard to provide, the one I thought would finally give Lila safety, had become a prison surrounded by picket fences and petty tyrants. I would sit at night in the living room, watching Lila sleep on the couch because she was too scared to sleep alone, and I would silently cry, not just from exhaustion, but from helplessness. How do you fight a system that pretends to be fair while protecting the people hurting your child? I started documenting everything, every letter, every fine, every photo Karen took, every time she walked by with that expression of superiority etched into her face. I didn't know exactly what I was building, but I knew I had to build something. A case, a defense, a weapon. Because if no one else would fight for my daughter, I would. It was a Wednesday morning in early April. The sun was shining, the sky was clear, and Lila was actually smiling. I remember that part most vividly, not the sirens, not the shouting, but her smile. She had been in such a good mood that day, dancing in her slippers, spinning slowly in the driveway, with her arms open wide like she was hugging the sky. Her therapist had introduced a new movement exercise that encouraged freedom of expression, and Lila had finally started enjoying it. That morning, she wore her favorite hoodie, the one with glittery stars, and carried her little notebook filled with hand-drawn constellations. She was humming softly, rocking side to side, safe, happy, innocent. I was inside finishing up a work call, watching her from the window. She was about 6 feet from our front door, well within the property line. The music from her headphones was so low, I could barely hear it when the door was open. And then everything shattered. A police cruiser pulled up without warning. No lights, no siren, just the quiet hum of a cruiser crawling toward our house like a predator. I saw it from the kitchen window and felt my stomach drop. 2 officers stepped out. 1 male, 1 female. Stern faces, stiff postures, the kind of body language you see when they think they're walking into danger. My breath caught in my chest. I rushed to the door, yelling, "She's just a child. What's going on?" But it was too late. Before I could reach them, the male officer was already walking toward Lila, barking commands that she didn't understand. "Hands out of your pockets. Turn down the music. She's not responding. Let's detain her." Detain her? Lila froze like a deer. She didn't know what was happening. She couldn't process the shouting. Her body stiffened, her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her notebook dropped to the ground. The female officer grabbed her arm and tried to pull her hands behind her back. And that's when Lila screamed. Not a tantrum, not defiance. A pure animal scream of terror, one I had never heard before. She twisted, fought, sobbed, gasping, "Mommy, Mommy," over and over again. The sound was so raw, so primal, it didn't even sound like her. My feet hit the sidewalk like thunder. I was yelling, begging, trying to reach her. "She's disabled. She doesn't understand. Please, please just let me explain." But they wouldn't stop. The officers handcuffed her. My 12-year-old, nonviolent, autistic daughter, who had never broken a law, never hurt a soul, was handcuffed on our driveway in broad daylight. I watched as she collapsed to her knees, shaking uncontrollably, tears pouring down her face. Her hair stuck to her cheeks. Her lips trembled as she whimpered, "Please don't take me away." Karen watched it all from her porch. I didn't even realize she was there until I heard her voice float across the lawn like a sick lullaby. I told them she was becoming aggressive. "I've got videos. The HOA's been notified." She said it without emotion, without remorse, just a calm declaration, as if she were confirming a grocery delivery. I turned to her in disbelief, my entire body shaking. "You called the cops on a disabled child?" Karen shrugged. "She's disturbing the peace. I warned you." The peace? This woman had declared war on a child, and now she was invoking peace like it justified everything. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand justice. But all I could do was fall to my knees beside my daughter as the officers stood there, clearly unsure of what to do now that the full picture was emerging. I thrust the medical folder I kept on hand at them: Lila's diagnosis, emergency care plan, therapist letters, even a laminated communication card explaining what to do during a sensory overload. The female officer's expression softened for the first time. She looked down at Lila and asked, "Do you want to take the cuffs off?" Lila nodded, eyes shut tight, like she was trying to disappear. They removed the handcuffs, but the damage was done. She wouldn't let anyone touch her for hours. She curled up in a corner of her room, rocking and whispering to herself, holding her bent notebook like a shield. I called her therapist, then her pediatrician, and finally a disability rights attorney. I filed a formal complaint against the officers, the HOA, and Karen. But complaints don't erase trauma. They don't undo what she saw, what she felt, what she now feared. From that day on, Lila wouldn't step outside unless I was physically holding her hand. The porch swing sat still. The birdhouse went untouched. She stopped humming. And Karen? She doubled down, claimed she had a right to protect community standards, sent emails to the HOA with grainy, cherry-picked clips from her recordings, twisted Lila's confusion into aggression, framed her fear as danger. And the HOA, God help me, they didn't condemn her. They said they'd review her evidence. No apology, no accountability, just more paperwork, more silence. That's when I knew we weren't just fighting a neighbor. We were fighting a machine, an HOA with power, a neighborhood with blind eyes, and a system that saw disability as disruption. But I wasn't backing down. If they thought handcuffs would silence us, they were wrong. This was the moment they made the biggest mistake of all. They messed with the wrong mother. In the days that followed Lila's arrest, the air in our home changed. It wasn't just quieter, it was heavier. Every sound, every movement, every breath felt like it echoed through the ache that had taken root in both of us. My daughter, once so full of silent wonder and quiet joy, now moved like a ghost through the house. She didn't want to speak. She barely ate. She flinched at sudden noises, even the gentle ding of the microwave or the wind brushing against the windows. Her notebook, the one filled with hand-drawn planets and star charts, lay abandoned on the floor of her room, pages bent and wrinkled from that day on the pavement. I didn't have the heart to pick it up. Lila stopped sleeping through the night. She would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, eyes wide with terror as if someone were still trying to pull her away from me. "The lady's watching," she whispered more than once, her voice raw. "She wants the police to take me again." I'd hold her tight, rubbing her back, whispering that she was safe, but the words felt hollow. Because even I wasn't sure anymore. We re-entered therapy, this time with a trauma specialist. Her sessions started with drawings, angry red scribbles, black clouds, stick figures with their hands up. She stopped responding to music therapy altogether. The headphones, once her favorite tool, now triggered full-blown panic. Her therapist gently told me Lila was displaying symptoms of PTSD. She needed structure, patience, safety, but how could I promise her safety when the woman responsible still lived across the street? Karen didn't slow down. If anything, she grew bolder. I saw her on her porch the next day, watering her flowers like she hadn't just shattered a little girl's world. The following week, she posted in the HOA Facebook group, without using our names, of course, about residents who refuse to comply with behavioral standards and children whose behavior puts others at risk. The post gathered likes from the usual suspects, people I'd seen nodding along at HOA meetings, who smiled at me at the mailbox, but never made eye contact for long. I waited for someone to speak out, to knock on my door and say, I saw what happened and it wasn't right, but most stayed silent. A few neighbors sent texts, so sorry you're going through this, but they never said it publicly. They feared Karen, the HOA, or both. Some said they didn't want to get involved. Others told me, off the record, that Karen had warned them I was making things political and using my daughter for sympathy. That lie nearly broke me. The HOA called an emergency meeting 2 weeks after the incident, not to apologize or investigate, but to review neighborhood conduct policies. I wasn't invited. When I requested the minutes, I received a redacted copy filled with vague phrases like community cohesion and de-escalation training. There was no mention of Lila, no admission of wrongdoing, just more spin, more paper, more indifference. But I wasn't idle. I started documenting everything, every email, every fine, every notice. I printed copies of Karen's posts. I kept a log of the dates she stood outside filming. I recorded my calls with the HOA. I even bought a security camera, not to invade anyone's privacy, but to protect mine. I knew now that the only way forward was proof. Because people like Karen didn't operate in truth, they operated in shadows and silence. And I was done being quiet. Meanwhile, Lila's struggles reached beyond the safety of her home. She had recently started attending a small special ed program 2 days a week, part of a hybrid plan to build her social confidence. But after the arrest, she begged not to go. When I finally coaxed her back, her teachers gently informed me that she had become withdrawn. She wasn't interacting with her classmates. She sat alone at lunch, drawing spirals in the corner of her notebook. And worse, a few kids had overheard their parents talking. One boy, parroting what he'd heard at home, told her, "You got arrested because you're weird." That night, she didn't speak at all. Watching her retreat back into herself was like watching a flower close forever. All the progress we had made, the courage she had fought for, was unraveling. I wanted justice. But what does justice even look like in a place where cruelty hides behind community bylaws? I filed an official complaint with the county. I contacted a civil rights attorney who warned me that cases against HOAs were notoriously difficult, but not impossible. I wasn't naive anymore. I knew Karen had years of experience bending the rules to her will. But I also knew something else. I wasn't going to let her win. I began reaching out to journalists, disability advocates, local politicians. I compiled a dossier, photos, logs, therapist letters, everything. This wasn't just a personal vendetta anymore. This was a pattern of abuse, enabled by a system that confused conformity with morality. And my daughter had paid the price. The devastation was real. It touched every part of our lives, our sleep, our trust, our peace. But beneath the grief, something else had begun to form. A fire. A refusal to accept what had happened as normal. Because if this could happen to Lila, if a child humming to herself could be treated like a criminal, then how many other families were suffering in silence? They thought they could bully us into submission, but they forgot one thing: a mother defending her child is not easily broken. I was done crying behind closed doors, done waiting for someone else to do the right thing. Karen may have started this war, but I was going to finish it, and not with shouting matches or social media posts, but with cold, irrefutable truth. I'd spent too many nights holding my daughter as she wept in fear of being taken again. I had to turn that pain into power. I had to fight back, not just for Lila, but for every child like her who had ever been made to feel like they were less because they were different. The first thing I did was call a civil rights attorney who specialized in disability discrimination. I told her everything, every fine, every recording, every time the HOA turned their backs on us. I handed over my log, timestamps Karen's comments, the police report, Lila's therapy documentation. I gave her the printouts of Karen's public Facebook comments, her letters, even the images she submitted to the HOA. The attorney read through it all and looked up at me with the same mix of rage and disbelief I had carried alone for months. "They've built a case against themselves," she said. "Now it's your turn." With her help, I filed a formal lawsuit against the HOA and Karen Whitmore for harassment, discrimination under the Fair Housing Act, and emotional distress. We cited the Americans with Disabilities Act and state laws protecting children with special needs. We named every fine, every incident of surveillance, and the trauma from the unlawful detainment. And once it was filed, I didn't hide it. I sent a copy of the filing to every member of the HOA board. I printed it and hand-delivered it to Karen's mailbox. I posted it in the community Facebook group along with a message: "If silence is the standard here, then let this be the loudest thing you've ever heard." And I didn't stop there. I reached out to a local news station and told them our story. At first, the producers sounded hesitant. Another HOA squabble, maybe? But once I mentioned that a disabled child had been handcuffed over a false noise complaint, everything changed. The reporter met with us within a week. They interviewed me. They interviewed Lila's therapist. They blurred Lila's face, but they didn't blur the truth. The story aired on a Tuesday night. Mother claims HOA harassed disabled daughter, files discrimination lawsuit. It spread like wildfire. The next day, our phone was flooded with messages: strangers sending support, disability advocates offering help, neighbors quietly apologizing for not speaking up sooner. One even resigned from the HOA board, saying, "I can't be part of this anymore." Karen's calm, smug demeanor cracked. She stopped waving. She stopped coming outside. Rumors swirled about her stepping down as HOA president. For the first time since we moved in, I felt the shift, not in power, but in perspective. People were finally seeing her for what she was. The lawsuit is still ongoing. These things take time, but we're not backing down. We're prepared to take it all the way to make sure this never happens to another family again. We're pushing for policy changes within the HOA, mandatory sensitivity training, protocols for handling complaints involving disabled residents, and strict limits on surveillance and fines. They may not have to like us, but they will learn to respect our rights. Lila's healing, slowly. She's speaking again in her sessions. Drawing again. The other day, she stood on the porch and looked across the street. Then she looked at me and whispered, "She can't hurt me now, right?" I knelt down, cupped her face in my hands, and said the words I had waited months to speak with certainty: "No, baby, she can't." Fighting back wasn't easy. It never is when you're the underdog, when you're the quiet voice going up against the loud machine. But justice doesn't always start with thunder. Sometimes it starts with a mother who refuses to be silent. The legal process moves slowly, painfully so. Court filings, discovery requests, depositions. Karen tried to delay everything, filing motion after motion, hiding behind the HOA's legal team like a child behind a curtain. But the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how many times people try to bury it. After 7 months, the first ruling came down. The court found sufficient grounds to proceed to trial under both the Fair Housing Act and state disability laws. That alone was a victory. Karen and the HOA had insisted it was all nonsense, just a mother overreacting. But a judge had finally said, "No, this deserves to be heard." In mediation, their tone shifted. The HOA, no longer led by Karen, offered a settlement. It wasn't massive, but it was enough to cover Lila's medical bills, therapy, and the legal costs I'd incurred. More importantly, they agreed to implement the very reforms I had demanded: mandatory disability awareness training, a formal grievance process, and stricter checks on the enforcement of HOA rules. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Karen? She resigned from the HOA permanently, moved out within 3 months. No public apology, no remorse, just a hollow statement about wanting to be closer to family. Her house sold quietly. Her shadow, however, lingered a while longer in the whispered conversations of neighbors who had once feared her and now pretended they never supported her. And yet, in the silence that followed, something new bloomed. Neighbors began stopping by, not out of pity but solidarity. A woman down the street shared how her autistic grandson had once been targeted by a landlord. Another mother, who had stayed silent through everything, brought Lila a set of sidewalk chalk and said, "Draw whatever you want. I'll back you up." Lila, in her own way, came back to life. She started humming again, started sitting on the porch in the evenings, sometimes just staring at the sky, like she used to, notebook in hand, drawing the constellations that made her feel infinite. One day, she turned to me and said, "The stars are always safe, right?" I smiled and nodded. Always. Did we win? In the legal sense, yes. In the emotional sense, some scars remain. But the important thing is, we were never silenced. They tried to erase us. They tried to make my daughter feel like her very existence was a disruption, but they failed. Because no matter how many letters they wrote, fines they issued, or lies they spread, one truth remained. My daughter matters. Her voice matters. And so does mine. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for hearing our story. Thank you for listening not just with your ears, but with your heart. What happened to Lila wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning. A reminder that injustice doesn't always arrive in a courtroom or in the headlines. Sometimes it hides behind fences, fine print, and fake smiles. My daughter was arrested for being herself, for making sounds, for existing differently. And for one neighbor, that was enough to declare war. But this isn't just about Karen. It's about a system that rewards cruelty when it's dressed up as order. A community that looks the other way until it's too late. A world that still doesn't know how to love children like mine fully and without condition. But we stood up. And now, I'm asking you to stand with us. If you see something, say something. If your neighborhood allows cruelty to thrive in the name of rules, challenge it. If you serve on an HOA board, speak up when others stay silent. And if you're a parent, never let anyone tell you your child is too much, too loud, or too different to belong. Because Lila belongs. Your child belongs. We all do. This story doesn't end with handcuffs. It ends with hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, by telling the truth out loud, we can make the world a little safer, a little kinder, for the next child who hums to herself on the sidewalk simply because the stars feel close that day. Share this story. Let them know we're not going anywhere.